In this problem, we have two binomials that we are going to be multiplying by each other, and it can look a little intimidating, but guess what? If you did the last problem, or the last assignment, 14.1, you can do this as well. What we're going to do is we're going to go through the steps and then find out that we can combine this together and it's going to be okay. So don't get scared. First thing it says is change any minus signs. Well, when I look at this problem, x plus 4 times x plus 9, I don't see any minus signs. So step 1, done. That was supposed to cross that out. I tried. Step number 2 says break it into two parts. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, I need to multiply x times this first. So I'm going to put an x, then I'm going to put my x plus 9. Okay, the second thing that I need to do is I need to take the second number, okay, and I'm going to multiply it by this parenthesis. So basically we're saying, okay, let's take the first thing in the parenthesis and multiply it by everything in the second one, and then take the second thing in the parenthesis and times it by everything. So in this one I'm going to write my 4, and then I'm going to write my x plus 9. So now I have two distributive property problems. So next step, step 3 says distribute. X times x is x squared. X times 9 is 9x. Then I'm going to bring down my plus sign, and then 4 times x is 4x. 4 times 9 is 36. The next step, step 4, says to combine like terms. Well, there's nothing like that one. So guess what? That is part of my answer, and I'm just going to write it here, x squared. Next, I'm going to look here, and I've got these two x's here in the middle. So I have a 9x, and then I have an additional 4 x's. If I take 9x and I add 4 more x's, I'm going to have 13 x's. And finally, down at the end of the problem, I have plus 36. I don't have any more constants in my problem, so I'm just going to write that as part of my answer. X squared plus 13x plus 36 is now my final answer. X plus 10 times x minus 7. Step 1 says change your minus signs. So instead of the minus by the 7, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put plus a negative 7. And I kind of had to go out of the bounds there because my handwriting is too big. One thing I do want you to know before I go any further is that I will do this problem again at the end without doing the plus a negative for those of you who prefer that way. So if you need to scroll forward, you can wait for that. Next step says to break it into two parts. I'm going to multiply the x times all of that. X times x plus a negative 7. And then I'm going to multiply the 10 times all of that. So I put a 10 here times x plus a negative 7. Now for the distributing. We should be pretty good at this after the last assignment. X times x is x squared. X times a negative 7 is negative 7x. So I have plus a negative 7x. 10 times x is 10x. 10 times a negative 7 is negative 70. My next step is to combine like terms. Right here in the middle I have two terms that have x's in them. My x squared, however, does not have anything that's like it. So when I combine a negative 7x plus 10x, I'm going to get 3x, and then I have plus a negative 70. Now, I personally don't like the double signs, like right here. So what my final step would be is instead of plus a negative 7, I would kind of undo the step number 1, which said to change the minus signs. So for me, I'm going to take that and I will change it to just a plain old minus 70. Now, for those of you who would like to do it without changing the signs, here we go. So what I did is I took off step number 1 because for some of you that don't want to do that. So I'm going to take the x and I'm going to multiply it by the x minus 7. Then I'm going to take the 10 and I'm going to multiply it by the x minus 7 as well. So now for the distributing. X times x is x squared. X times a negative 7 is negative 7x. 10 times x is 10x. 10 times a negative 7 is negative 70. Next, I'm going to combine like terms. My x's in the middle, right here, I'm going to combine together. So my final answer would be x squared plus 3x minus 70. On this problem, I will once again show two different ways to do the problem. So if you like the first way, you're done. If you like the second way, you need to kind of hold off. I guess that depends on if you watched the last video. Step number 1 says change the minus signs. So I'm going to come right here where it has x minus 1, and I'm going to change that to plus and negative. And I realize that that is pretty small to see, but I made it work. Okay, I'm going to multiply x times the whole parenthesis on the next one. So x, and then x plus 4. Next, I will multiply the negative 1. Remember, that is a negative 1 there, even though it's hard to tell, times the x plus 4. My next step is to distribute. X times x is x squared. X times 4 is 4x. Negative 1 times x is negative 1x. Negative 1 times a positive 4 is negative 4, or plus a negative 4. So my final step is to combine like terms. I don't have anything that matches my x squared. I do, however, have two terms in the middle that are alike. They both have an x. So plus 4x plus a negative 1x. So basically 4x plus a negative 1x, which is 3x. And then down here at the end, I have plus a negative 4. Now, I've talked about this in most of my videos. I don't love the double signs. I used it up here to get my correct sign, but at the end I can say, oh, well, if I changed my minus to be plus a negative, let's undo that to make it just a minus sign. So right here at the end, I would have minus 4 instead of plus a negative 4. For those of you who do not want to do step 1, so we're going to cross that out. Here is the other way that you can do it. We're going to still break it up into two parts. X is going to be multiplied by x plus 4. And then I will have my minus 1 multiplied by, again, the x plus 4. Okay, x times x, x squared. X times 4 is 4x. Now, I'm not going to write down this plus sign because that's where I'm going to get my double negatives, or double signs. So what I'm going to do next is just go negative 1 times x, which is negative 1x, negative 1. So notice this is negative 1 times a positive 4, which will give me negative 4. Next, I'm going to combine like terms. The only like terms I have are here in the middle. They both have an x on them. So my final answer would be x squared plus 3x minus 4. For this video, I will be solving this problem in two different ways, so if you do not understand or like the first way, stick around and watch the second one. One of them's got to work for you. Step number 1 says to change the minus signs. So what that means is when it says x minus 10, I'm going to change that to plus a negative 10. I realize that that is on top of itself, but it is what it is. The next one is going to be plus a negative 6. Step number 2 says break it into two parts. I am going to take the x and I'm going to multiply it by everything that's in that parentheses. So x is going to be times x plus a negative 6. Then I am going to take the negative 10 here, remember that's a negative 10, and I'm going to multiply it by everything in the second parenthesis, x plus a negative 6. My next step is to distribute. X times x is x squared. X times a negative 6 is negative 6x. I'm going to bring my plus sign down here from the middle. Then I'm going to say negative 10 times x is negative 10x. And then I'm going to bring my plus sign down again, and negative 10 times a negative 6 is going to be a positive 60. The next step in this problem is to combine like terms. In the middle of this problem, I have two terms that have an x in them, so those would be my like terms. When I combine them together, a negative 6x and a negative 10x, I get negative 16x. In front, however, I have an x squared, and at the end I have my plus 60. An x squared and an x and something, a constant that does not have a variable, are all not like terms, so I cannot combine them together. Now for way number 2. Way number 2 involves not using step 1. So if you like this way, then here it goes. I still break it up into two parts. I have my x times the second parenthesis, which is x minus 6. Then I have to take this as a negative 10 times the second parenthesis, which is x minus 6. Okay, next I'm going to distribute. X times x is x squared. X times a negative 6, remember you have to look at that as a negative 6, is a negative 6x. Negative 10 times x is a negative 10x. And then the last one, and this is why the changing the signs kind of helps some people, I have to think of this as a negative 10 times a negative 6, which is a positive 60. So even though it's less writing where you don't change the signs, sometimes people get confused on the signs. So you have to choose what works for you. Our last step is to combine like terms. I have an x squared, then I have a negative 6 minus 10. Well, that is negative 16x plus 60. In this problem, I will be solving this in two different ways. So if you do not like the first way, please stick around for the second way. Step number 1 says change the minus signs. In the second parenthesis, if you notice, it says x minus 2. So I'm going to change this to plus a negative 2. The next thing I'm going to do is break it into two parts. I have an 8 by my x here, so I'm going to take both the 8 and the x, and I'm going to multiply it by the second parenthesis, which is x plus a negative 2. Then I am going to take the second number in my first parenthesis, which is 1, and I'm also going to multiply it by x plus a negative 2. Now I am going to distribute 8x times x. Well, 8 times 1 is going to be 8. X times x is x squared. 8x times a negative 2. I'm going to bring my plus sign down, and then I just have to work with negatives. Well, I'm going to start with positives and negatives. What is a positive 8 times a negative 2? That is negative 16. And then I have an x here, and I don't have an x here, so it's just negative 16x. Next I'm going to bring my plus sign down. 1 times x is 1x. You can write the 1 or not. It is your choice. And then lastly, I have my plus sign again, and 1 times a negative 2 is negative 2. Next, I'm going to combine like terms. Here in the middle, I have my x's. They are my like terms. I start with my 8x squared, and then I have a negative 16x plus 1x. That is negative 15x. And then I have plus a negative 2. If you've been watching any of my videos, you know that I don't love double signs. So the double signs are here and here. So I'm going to illustrate to the side what I'm doing. If you remember at the beginning of the problem, it said x minus 2. And how did we change that to positive? We said it was plus a negative. So what I'm going to do is I'm basically, and if you watch right up here, watch what I'm doing, I'm going to take off the plus and negative. What did it become? Minus. So my final answer is going to be 8x squared minus 15x minus 2. Now stick around and I'll show you the second way. My second way is to just skip step 1. Now, most kids do better on the signs if they do step 1, but some kids don't like doing the double signs, so this is for you. I'm still going to break it up into two parts. I have 8x times x minus 2. Then I have 1 times, again, x minus 2. Now I'm going to distribute. 8x times 8, or x, is 8x squared. 8x times a negative 2 is going to be negative 16x. 1 times x is 1x, and then 1 times a negative 2 is going to be negative 2. Next, I'm going to combine like terms here in the middle. So my final answer would be 8x squared minus 15x minus 2.